All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Just waiting. My name is Farhan. Just be starting here shortly, inshallah. Just, okay. I will be starting here shortly, inshallah. Um, just give it a few more minutes, waiting for people to trickle in. We'll start in exactly 2 minutes, inshallah. Right. So those who are just joining right now, we are just we'll be starting in 1 or 2 more minutes, inshallah. All right. One more minute and then we'll start. All right. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Today's topic is called Unveiling the Truth, Real World Problems Teenagers and College Students Face. My name is Farhan Ahmed, and this is a topic that we'll be covering today. So, let me start. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. So just a little bit about my background. You know, since I'm I just want you all to know a little bit about me and my expertise, what I've done in life. So, Alhamdulillah, I've completed my master's in clinical mental health counseling from the University of Argosy University here in Chicago. I've worked as a therapist seeing children, teenagers, adults, couples, and families. So I've seen kids as young as 5 and adults as old as 73. And at the same time, I've also I've done a lot of marital work, a lot of premarital work, and also helping families with the issues that they're having. Alhamdulillah. What I focused on in my practice, right? Anxiety. Worked with a lot of people who were anxious, that were dealing with depression, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, marital discord, sexual intimacy, people having issues with their marriage, self-esteem issues, anger management, people that were, dealing with spiritual and personal development issues, and also, a lot of people who have dealt with suicidal ideation, bipolar disorder. So these is a wide range of diagnoses that I worked with, alhamdulillah, and we'll be talking about some of them today, especially anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation. And on top of that, I've also had the fortune, alhamdulillah, to study Islamic studies before. I've finished 3 years out of the 6 years of the Mia program. Unfortunately, I was not able to finish because, alhamdulillah, I have a family. I know I look very young. You guys, a lot of people say that, oh, how old are you? I might be 21, 22, but I'm actually 31, right? I've been married for, alhamdulillah, 11 years. I got married when I was 20, and I have 3 kids. So I know a little bit about parenting as well. So I have an 8-year-old son, a 6-year-old daughter, and a newborn. She's about 6 months years old. So have a lot of experience with younger children, as well as dealing with teenagers and working adults and college students. So that's a little bit about my background. Okay, so today, what I really want to do is, before we get delve into the issues of what teenagers and college students deal with, I want to talk about marriage, right? Because and how it affects our children. In reality, you know, yes, whatever we do in our marriages is going to severely affect our children and their well-being. So I'm not going to talk about the rights of a husband and wife. We all know that. What I want to talk about is marriage in a more practical sense, right? So as you can see over here, the divorce rate in the US is around 40 to 50%, right? That's the divorce rate. So if you're thinking about it, 1 out of every 2 people are getting divorced. For Muslims specifically, 33.3% is the divorce rate. So what is that? 1 out of every 3 couples are getting divorced. So you might say, why is this important? Why are we even talking about this? Because the issue is, what we do, like I mentioned, what we do in our marriages is going to affect our children, right? You are technically never going to be free from your ex, even if you were to say, get divorced from them, because you'll have to deal with them in court. You'll have to deal with them when it comes to visitation rights. You have to deal with them when it comes to, their education. So throughout their life, your ex, if 2 people got divorced, they'll always have to deal with each other in one way or another. And how we deal with each other is going to impact our children because, that's their father or that's their mother, right? And if, not having that relationship with them, we'll go into it more in detail, but there's a lot of research that what it does to the child when they're not able to have a relationship with a spouse, with their father or their mother. So last point, on here is growing up in a happy home protects children from mental, physical, educational, and social problems, right? So I'm going to go into each one of these. How does it protect children um, from mental problems, right? Well, think about it. They don't have to deal with the stress of the parents always fighting if they're in a happy home. When two couples fight, when a couple fights, right, the husband and the wife, what happens? The husband is upset, the wife is upset, they can't focus. It's very difficult to focus at work. It's difficult to do anything, right? And but think about it from the child's perspective. What happens with the child? They're seeing the two people in the world that they love the most that are fighting. They're not able to focus either. I had a client once. He called me up. Right? He said my dad dropped me and my mother off at Walmart, and he just left us. Muslim couple. This was a Muslim couple, and their Muslim child was calling me, and they said that my dad dropped us off, and I can't focus. Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm 17 years old. I see my mom crying. How am I supposed to deal with this? His grades were getting affected. He was not able to be in a good emotional state. So what we do affects our children, right? And how does it physically protect our children if we have a happy house, a happy home? Well, research has shown that your our children are 40% more at risk of being physically and sexually abused when their parents find new partners. So, what does that mean? If, you know, the divorce rate is so high, right? So if people get married, remarried, what happens? They find a new spouse, and we don't know how that new person is. And this increases the risk of our children getting physically and sexually abused. And you might say that, well, I never heard this before. I could tell you right now, we a lot of times in therapy, women and children, they always come to us and they tell us, like, I was sexually abused. This happened to me when I was younger. And a lot of the times the parents don't believe them. Especially we think that how can this happen? And it usually happens from somebody that's very close to us, right? Within our families. And we have to protect our children. But if we don't have our life in order, what's going to happen is our children are going to be vulnerable. So this is something that I always say, that if your child comes to you saying that, something happened to me, believe them. Talk with them, take them to an expert. That's something I just want to really emphasize about, because a lot of this things, physical abuse and sexual abuse, it goes unnoticed. We don't really talk about it in our Muslim communities, and this is something that our children deal with. And as they grow up and get older, they haven't dealt with it, and it affects their marriages and how they do in life, right? So growing up in a happy home protects our children from, you know, educational problems. How so? Well, you are twice as likely to academically struggle if compared to children who are in first marriage families. So people that, parents have not been divorced, they have children, they're going to succeed better, more likely than people whose parents are divorced, and they're going back in between homes, right? And then also socially, what how so? Because kids that come from divorced families, they're not as confident, right? They don't feel like they have a family. Now you have a mother and you have a father, and they have their own families, and you're split. Where do I go for Eid? Do I go to my mom's house? Do I go to my father's house? How does my parents' families, how do they view me? Right? So they deal with social problems. The social circle, it changes. Now, instead of like when a couple was together, they had a set group of friends. But now what happens? Their friends are different, right? The mother, she has her own group of friends. The father has his group of friends, and the children, they don't know where they belong, especially when if their parents get remarried, right? Where do they fit in all of this? So these are this is something I just want to highlight, that what how it impacts a child that comes from a divorced family. Now, children and divorce. And the reason I'm talking about this is that, inshallah, all of our marriages are good, right? But we have to deal with reality. Reality is that the divorce rates are getting higher, and there's a lot of children that are being impacted by this. And I just want to be able to talk about some of these issues that the children are dealing with and how we can help them, right? And I see this a lot in my practice, right? A lot of times kids are coming in, they're crying, they're like, I don't know what to do. I can't see my father, I can't see my mother. And that's one thing I want to highlight right here is don't use your kids as pawns, right? When it comes to children and divorce, don't use your kids as pawns. What do I mean? A lot of times the mother or the father, whoever has custody, they won't let their children see uh, their other parent. Why? Because they're upset with them, right? They're really upset with the parent, and they say that, well, they did me wrong, and what I'm going to do is I'm not going to let my child see them. And then they make some excuses saying that, they tell their child that, oh, they haven't called, they don't care about you. And the children come to people like me, and they're crying, and they're saying, why is my dad doing this? But I know what's really happening is that the one of the parents is upset, and they're not allowing their child to see their parent, right? And it affects them emotionally, like we talked about, right? So co-parenting, this is another thing, is that if two people are divorced, we have to work together. They have to work together for the betterment of the child, right? Put the children first, right? Don't don't think about yourselves, think about your children, right? Um, it's just not the parents that get affected during a divorce. It's the children that are the most affected by this, right? Um, be cordial with one another, because, like my last point, children are observational learners. What we do and how we act with one another is how our children are going to act growing up. Like I'll give an example is when we pray salah, right? When you pray salah, what happens if you have a small child, you might not have taught them salah. They're 2 years old, but they come next to you, and because you're praying, they start mimicking your actions, right? You didn't tell them how to pray, but they start doing all of the same things that you're doing because they're observation learners. So how we treat one another is how our children are going to treat their spouses when they grow up, right? Are going to treat other people when they grow up, right? And I want to also highlight that children that come from divorced families, right, and they don't have both parents in their lives. We talked about co-parenting and making sure that both parents are in their lives. you know m- Boys, they're who lose their father, they don't have their father, are twice as likely than those that do have, to not enter college, right? To not find stable employment after high school. They have a diminished self-concept. And even women, what happens to them is that they're more sexually active, and on top of that, they have father issues. They will look for a father figure in their life. They'll look for somebody that's older to them. And you might have seen this, that they marry sometimes people much older than them. Why? Because they miss out that father figure in their life, and they're looking to make it up. So, this is why it's so important to have both parents, regardless of whatever is going on with them, inside the child's life, and make sure that, you know, they come first, right? Some other issues that they could have is behavioral issues. They're not able to adjust well in society. They find it more difficult to make friends. The whole abandonment issue, thinking that, is this person going to leave me? When they get married, it's hard for them to trust, and they're more likely to get divorced. And they're also more likely to get involved in crimes and use drugs and alcohol. And drugs and alcohol is something that we're going to be talking about later on in this presentation, but I just want to highlight that. All right. So, um, now next thing is how to save our marriages, right? Because now I told you that, the divorce rates are very high. is 33.3%. So, how do we make sure that we have a healthy marriage and that it will benefit our kids, right? First and foremost, you know, it'll help us so that we're not stressed or we're not in a bad place mentally, but also to benefit our kids so that they are able to succeed in life. So, what are some of those tips? Well, number one is marital coaching, marital therapy, right? Marital coaching, marital therapy, whatever you want to say. That is super important because what happens in marital coaching is that couples learn to understand their issues through a different lens. We now are able to see the other person's perspective. We always see what we want to see, but now we're able to learn from the other person, right? And I always tell couples because they're a lot of times they're very hesitant to come into marital therapy or marital coaching, and I tell them that listen, you know, agreeing or understanding the person is not agreeing because they feel like if I understand what they're going through and understand them, then that means I'm agreeing with them. And, I can't let that happen. I can't let them know that I'm agreeing with them because I want it my way. And I always give the example that, listen, if there was a parent who was breaking into cars and stealing money, right? We would be like, that's terrible. Why is this adult doing that? I mean, they should go to jail. But then if you find out later on that that parent was stealing because they have a dying child, right? And they don't have any other means of saving the child, we might start to understand that, okay, you know what? I still don't agree with what they're doing, but I understand why they're taking the actions and doing, breaking into cars. And that's what I tell people is that just because you understand your spouse does not mean that you have to agree with them. And a lot of times, just being able to understand them and what they're going through helps them, be able to communicate with you more, with each other more, and also solves a lot of the issues. So, what do we do in marital coaching is that we learn new ways and tools of communicating to help with conflict resolution, right? Um, we see it in a different perspective. Therapists, the marital coach, they're objective and not subjective. A lot of times, what we do is we go to family and friends, people that uh, don't are not trained in this field, and they make it worse. That's why I always say go to somebody that's trained. So, what are three things that are needed to make marital coaching work? Number one, you have to be motivated. If you're not motivated to change, then nothing's going to work, right? You have to want to come in and say, you know what, I'm doing this so I could, improve my marriage, make everybody's life better, make our lives better, and have that motivation, right? Number two, timing. On average, it takes 6 years before a couple seeks counseling, right? 6 years. Think about all the damage that is done between years 1 to 6, and then they develop bad communication habits. They start building up resentment towards one another, and it starts boiling over. Most divorces happen when 1 to 3 years. If you make it past your third year, it drops down. The divorce rate drops down significantly, almost half. Um, and if you make it to 7 years, inshallah, usually the divorce rate is very small, very little. So timing is very important when you seek help, right? And the last thing that I say is taqwa, having taqwa. Because you have to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always watching us, right? How we deal with one another, we're going to be asked about that, right? So taqwa is an important concept in our marriages that we have to, um, always be cognizant of. I'm just going to adjust this camera. Okay. All right. So now we talked about marriage and how that affects children. But what I want to get into now is the meat of the topic, right? The meat of the presentation, which is issues teenagers and young adults face. So we're going to be going through each one of these topics. What are they? Bullying, right? We're going to go over bullying, social media, how social media affects our children, mental health, in particular anxiety, depression, and I mentioned suicide ideation, We're going to be talking about drugs, pills, e-cigarettes, right? Alcohol, because even though it's haram, we all know that in Islam, we a lot of our teenagers and youth and college students are still indulging in this, right? Relationships, boyfriends, girlfriends, and pornography, right? And I know pornography is a very hot topic, meaning that a lot of us might not feel comfortable talking about it and might not feel comfortable hearing about it. And if we're sitting around with our children, I mean, if you don't want them, this is geared towards adults, right? This presentation. So, I mean, I think it's useful for children to hear about this. But if you don't feel comfortable, then I would say, you know what, you and your spouse listen in, and I'm just going to be talking about it from a practical point about what's happening, right? Because a lot of the times adults don't know what's going on in their children's lives, right? They might not have been born here in America, they might have lived back home, came uh, a- afterwards, migrated over here. So they don't know a lot of what teenagers in the US are going through, in Western society are going through, and this is not meant to, like, I guess, not shock you, but just to educate you, right? Educate each one of us about what is really going on with our teenagers and our youth. You know, I don't think a lot of parents know. We don't like to think about it. As long as our children are doing good in school, right? They're getting good grades, then we'd like to overlook some of the bad things that might be happening, right? It's easier out of sight, out of mind. If we don't think about it, it's ignorance is bliss, as we say, right? So, but I mean, that's why I really want to talk about some of these things, and let's get into it, inshallah. All right. So the first topic I want to talk about that is bullying, right? So what is bullying? So the definition of bullying is abuse or mistreatment of someone vulnerable by someone more powerful. What does that mean? You have somebody that's weaker and you have somebody that's more powerful, and the person who's more powerful is abusing or mistreating somebody who's weaker, right? We might have all experienced this in life at one time or another, but we might not have used the term bullying, right? We might have used that they're picking on us, or you know just some of our friends or parents, they don't ignore it, don't, just forget about it, right? But this is a term that's being used now a lot in our school systems, right? And children are getting in trouble for that, and we need to know about bullying because of how what it does on the psyche of a child, right? So 20% of teens have experienced bullying, right? This is according to the National Center of Educational Statistics. That means one out of every five teenagers have been bullied, right? 55% of Muslim students reported being bullied. Why? Because of their religion. After 9/11, I could say that, a lot of us who went to school over here, we might have got bullied because of what happened, right? Oh, you Muslims, you terrorists, getting called all sorts of names. I know a lot of people personally that used to get into fights, right? Over being called these raghead and all of these different derogatory terms. So, Muslim students, and this is from the Family and Youth Institute, and just not so long ago, and Muslims, it's saying how they've been bullied and how it affects them, right? So, there's different types of bullying, right? You could be bullied because of your height, right? You might be short, and so kids pick on you. Somebody might pick on you, right, for being short. You could be bullied because of your weight. It's called fat shaming, right? You're so fat, and then they make fat jokes about you, right? And this lowers self-esteem. Because of your appearance. Some people might have a disformity, right? And they get picked on because of that. Because of your race. Think about it. You're the only brown person, or the only non-white person, or a different person in that wherever you live. I know where a lot of you live in Cleveland, but I grew up in Ohio. right? Between Dayton and Columbus, there's a place called Springfield, and there was only 50 Muslim kids growing up. So I had to make a lot of friends that didn't look like me, and just trying to fit in, right? And dealing with that, it's very difficult for people, because you are different, and they might make jokes about you being different, right? And you could be also bullied because of your religion, right? Muslims, I mean, we all know about the portrayal of Muslims in social media and how Muslims are portrayed, right? And a lot of people have a negative attitude, like they think negatively about Muslims. I remember when I was doing my master's, right, in clinical mental health counseling, I used to wear a thobe on purpose, right? And after our class, after the semester was done, we all had to get around a circle, sit in a circle, and talk about what our first impressions were of each person in the class. And there's 15 people in there, and all 15 people said the same thing, that when they first saw me, they thought I was one of those people on TV. You know, they had negative thoughts about me. They're like, "Oh man, I'm scared. He's here." So they had a negative thought, but they were like, after we got to know you, we like you, we wanna get to know more about Islam, Muslims, and everything, because the media, they scare people, right? They make Muslims look very bad. So a lot of children, like 55% of what we talked about, Muslim students reported being bullied because of being Muslim, right? And what are some of the I'm going to talk about cyberbullying also, right? But I want to talk, I want to go back to a point real quick, is effects of bullying. Okay, what are some of the effects of bullying? People that are bullied, right? They increase depression. They're more likely to be depressed. They're more likely to be anxious, right? They're more likely to be stressed. They're crying because people are making fun of them. They're more emotional, right? They act out. And also on top of that, they have more suicidal thoughts, right? They think about killing themselves, not wanting to live anymore. They feel they're more isolated, right? They don't want to meet people anymore. They want to get away from society because of uh, all the name calling and how people think of them. So, these are some of the effects. And what does it also do? It decreases physical health, right? You don't want to go outside, you don't want to play, you don't want to, do things that you once liked. Your connection to society, you don't want to meet people anymore. So that's decreased. And your academic performance. A lot of times, people that are getting bullied, they don't even want to go to school. They fake sick, right? They'll say that, oh, there's something wrong with me, but there's really nothing wrong. They just don't want to deal with those people that are bullying them, right? And then the whole problem of tattletaling or the terminology they use today is snitching, and is anybody going to actually come to my aid and help me, right? And a lot of times, unfortunately, nobody comes to help, right? And this keeps on going till you hear about school shootings, right? I mean, if you guys remember Columbine and what happened, those people were bullied. What did they do? They took it out on those people that actually made fun of them, right? And so these are some of the effects of what happens when people are bullied. And another thing I want to talk about is cyberbullying, because this is a kind of a new terminology that recently came out, right? 10% of teens have reported being bullied on social media. That's what cyberbullying is, right? Being bullied, not in person, but on social media through WhatsApp, through TikTok, through Instagram, through all of these different uh, means of social media, right? And they post offensive comments. They send it to a large group of people, and it just goes around like wildfire, right? If you're like, this is actually more problematic, because think about it. If you were being bullied in person, it's only limited to those people that are around you at that moment of time. But now on social media, everybody is connected to social media. Everybody could see it, right? And what does that do to the psyche of a child or a teenager or a person that has been bullied, right? So many rumors, lies like, are spread in a very quick manner. So now that we talk about bullying, I want to talk about social media. Social media, I want to talk about in particular the addiction of social media and the harms of social media because our teenagers and even adults are addicted to social media, right? What are some forms of social media? Well, there's Facebook, there's Instagram, there's TikTok, there's Clubhouse, WhatsApp. All of these are just different forms of social media. You know, one in every five children by the age of 8 already has an iPhone or has a smartphone, right? So think about that. An 8-year old, one out of every five children by the time they're 8 years old already has a smartphone. So what's happening? On average, teens, you know, check their phones up to 80 times a day. There's only 24 hours in a day, and six of those were sleeping. So think about how many times we constantly pick up our phones and check it, right? Teens spend about 7 hours a day on their phones, and tweens on social media, and teenagers to, they're becoming in their 20s and college students, they spend about 5 hours a day. So think about how much of our time, how much of our lives are going into social media, right? Um, and that's kind of actually scary. I mean, like we're supposed to be focusing on our jobs or focusing on school, and but instead we're focusing on the social media, replying to people, posting, and a lot of that time is just being wasted, right? There's actual interviews done with employees from Apple, Google, Facebook, who actually have warned about social media, right? Saying that these companies, the companies that they work for, they deliberately design these apps, right? Facebook owns Instagram, right? They deliberately design these apps to be more addictive. They want us to keep going back and using these apps. Why? Because it generates more profits. So they're constantly thinking about how do we get these people to keep using our apps so we could generate profits, right? Um, there's a movie. Actually, I would, I don't recommend watching movies. I haven't watched it myself, but Netflix. Just so you know, I could let you all know. There's an actual movie on Netflix called Social Dilemma, right? Netflix actually made a movie called Social Dilemma, which it focuses on, right? The whole premise is focusing on how big social media companies manipulate their users by using algorithms to encourage addiction to their platforms, right? So it's a wide known phenomenon. It's widely known this that how these companies want us to be addicted to our phones, right? To social media. And think about it. I mean, like when you're at dinner, I mean, if you ever go to outside for dinner, we see a lot of people, just sitting on their phones and texting or on social media, and the whole family's around. Nobody's talking to one another. So look how addicted we are to our phones that even though we are with our family members, what are we doing? We're talking to other people. We're on social media. We're posting about, hey, look what I'm eating, and look what I'm doing, right? Rather than spending the time with those who are in front of us. So this is what's happening with our teens, and it only, as you see, 7 hours or 5 hours, and even adults, it spend a lot of time. So this is something that we have to be cognizant of, right? What are some of the harms? How does it harm our teens and our uh, college students? Well, because number one, lack of social skills, right? 43% of teens say that they use their phone to avoid interacting with people. Think about it. A lot of adults, they always complain that, this person, they don't know how to communicate with us anymore. Like they don't know, like I'm asking a question, they don't know how to, don't have any communication skills. Why is that? Because you're not practicing. You're not talking to anybody. You're talking through a phone. So yes, you might be the greatest texter, but when it comes to actually talking to somebody live, you might not know how to communicate with somebody. Right. And 40, like I said, 43% of teens say that they use it so that they could avoid people. They don't, teenagers today, a lot of them don't know how to articulate themselves, right? So think about getting a job. right? When you go into an interview, you know what to say, how to, uh, feeling comfortable. They don't feel comfortable, and this could hinder their employment options, right? Uh, Another harm we mentioned, I'm going to go back to sexting because I want to spend some time on that. But another harm is cyberbullying, right? We talked about cyberbullying already, about social media, how, Facebook, Instagram, and all of that had to make cyberbullying worse because now at the click of your finger, you could send it to a lot more people, you know, uh, lies and rumors and hurtful things about one another, right? Sexting. Right? This is a huge thing. Maybe some of you've heard about sexting, some of you probably have not heard about sexting. But this is something really big that's happening due to social media, right? And what is sexting? It's sending sexually explicit messages, photos, or video via cell phones, right? Through social media. So, you know, 23% of girls, teenage girls, and 34% of teenage boys have admitted to, sexting, right? And they've done it because why? They wanted to fit in. There's a lot of peer pressure, right? That, oh, did you do so and so with this girl? Or, hey, you should talk to this girl, you should do this and that, right? So they want to fit in, they want to feel cool, right? Remember when I was growing up, um, everybody knew I was Muslim. So one of my friends, their mother said that, I know you can't have a girlfriend, but I think you should, it'll be good for you. And she's like, don't let your parents know, and then I could actually bring the girl over, and you could date if you want to. I was like, no, I'm okay with that. I don't want to do anything like that. Alhamdulillah. But it's about fitting in. Like, these Americans, like, everybody wants us to, like, that's how to be normal, right? To have a girlfriend, to do all of these things. And 1 in 4 teens said that either they received sexting, right, like a sexually explicit message, right? So that's 25%, right? 1 in every 4. And 15% of teenagers said that they actually sent them, right? So we gotta think about this, like the effects of what social media, like what our kids are doing with social media, right? They're sending inappropriate messages, right? Or receiving inappropriate messages from other people. It's hindering their social skills. They might be getting bullied online, you know. And the last thing that I want to talk about is mental health, how social media is affecting mental health, right? So according to the Pew Research Center, 69% of adults and 81% of teens in the US use social media, right? So we already talked about how um, they're designed to be more addictive. But what does it do? You know, there's research that shows that it exacerbates anxiety and depression. You know, um, you're more likely to have low self-esteem. You don't, even though social media is designed to make you feel a part of a group, people actually reported feeling more lonely, right? You are more self-centered, and right, you're not making real life connections. So we'll go more into mental health in the slides coming up, but these are some of the harms of social media. Now, in particular, when it comes to mental health, I want to talk about anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation, right? The two most common types of mental health disorders are anxiety and depression. And our teenagers and um, our college students are not immune to anxiety and depression. So now, what is anxiety? So the definition of anxiety is that it is a complex emotional state that is often triggered by initial fear, right? So we're scared about something that's going to happen in the future, right? It's future driven, oriented, driven by what if thinking. What does that mean? Like, you have a student or you have a person, you might think, what if I fail this exam, right? They have an exam coming up and they're thinking, what if I fail? What if I can't succeed? Right? Or somebody's in their marriage and they say that or about to get married, what if my spouse is terrible? What if my marriage is not how I want it to be? Right? You're always thinking about something that hasn't happened yet. It's future driven, future oriented, and what if thinking. So, You know, um, when we do feel anxious, we might have increased heart rate. Our heart rate might be increased. We might be sweating, right? Profusely sweating. We might have some dizziness, some pressure, some rapid breathing, right? So fear is what drives anxiety. That's what the underlying psychological state is. It's fear. And there's different types of anxiety, right? Some of the different types of anxiety, there's separation anxiety disorder, which is when a child becomes fearful and nervous when they are separated from their home or their parents at a young age. And that's why you see like people that deal with separation anxiety disorder, what happens is when they become older, they might not trust their spouse, right? They might not get close to their spouses because they fear that, what happens if my parent or somebody that I love when I was younger could leave me, what this person might leave me, right? So that's one form of anxiety. Another thing is social anxiety disorder, right? What will people think about me? What do people think about me? What might they say about me? So we're scared to come around people. We're scared to make friends, develop friendships. We're scared of the public, right? That's what social anxiety disorder is. There's panic disorder, which is sudden and repeated attacks of fear that last for several minutes or longer. It's like, um, if you're having a heart attack, you might feel like you're having a heart attack or something, right? And there's also general anxiety disorder, right? Which is persistent and excessive worrying about a number of things, right? You might worry and generally just worry about your family, like are they okay, right? Your wealth, like am I going to lose my job, right? And look, we all have some anxiety that we deal with, right? And anxiety in general is not always a bad thing, right? Because it allows us to work harder, right? If we have a little bit of anxiety about a test or a performance, some performance issue at work, right? What happens is that it makes us work harder, right? We might study more or we might try being better at our jobs. But what I'm saying, general anxiety disorder, is that you constantly think about this. You're excessively worrying that I'm gonna get fired. My boss is gonna fire me tomorrow, or that I'm gonna lose all my wealth. And there's nothing actually that going to cause that, but you're just thinking that somebody's going to rob me. I'm going to lose everything. Something's bad's going to happen to my family. So these are just examples of general anxiety disorder, right? So different types of anxiety. So one in every um, three people between the ages of 13 to 18 will experience an anxiety disorder, right? One in every three. So think about that. Between the ages of 13 to 18, 3 out of 4 students in college have said they have experienced an overwhelming anxiety at some time. So that's 75%, right? According to US Census Bureau. So, what are some causes of anxiety? You know, just talking to clients, I mentioned that they're worried about their jobs, they might be worried about, their families, but, there's a whole new phenomenon happening right now that people are saying that they don't want to have children because they're scared of the world, right? What will happen? With everything that's happening in the world, they're really scared that bringing their child into this world, with there's a lot of shootings happening, drills, lockdowns. This is stuff that our teenagers are dealing with, right? Drills, lockdowns at school. Hearing about all these shootings, right? So they get scared, right? That's one cause of anxiety that's happening. Another is what we mentioned earlier, social media, right? Responses to social media posts. Like, what are people going to say about me? What do people think about me? What is the news out there about me, right? All of these things are causing anxiety within our children. Going to depression. So we talked about anxiety. Now I want to talk about depression. So what is depression? It's a feeling of sadness and or a loss of interest in activities you once enjoyed, right? So these are activities that you like doing, but now because you feel depressed, you don't want to do them anymore, right? You don't like to play basketball. You don't like to go out with friends. You don't want to even get out of bed anymore, right? So there's different types of depression. One is major depressive disorder, which is you're persistently depressed, having a depressed mood or loss of interest in activities, and it causes an impairment in your daily life, right? There's persistent depressive disorder, right, which is a mild but long-term form of depression. And the difference between that and major depressive disorder is that usually lasts for 2 years or longer. And then there's also disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, right? And this happens within children, especially where they're very irritable, they have anger, a lot of anger, frequent and intense temper outbursts, right? So these are just different types of depression. So 3.2 million adolescents in the US said that they had at least had one major depressive disorder, right? This is by the National Institutes of Mental Health. So our adolescents, right? Our youth are not immune to depressive disorders, right? 13% of teenagers um, may experience depression before reaching adulthood, right? They will experience depression before reaching adulthood. And what are some of the common causes of depression? Well, one is genetics, right? It could be hereditary. And the other is situational. And we talked about the situation, different situations, right? One, you might be abused, right? You could be abused by a family member. Um, you know, there might be a conflict in your life that makes you very depressed, right? A major event. A lot of times somebody in our family might have passed away or a very close friend, somebody that was very impactful, and then makes a person depressed, right? Like, how can they leave? How can they're gone and everything. So they get depressed about that. So genetics and situational um, and situations, different situations can make people depressed, right? And what happens a lot of times if we don't work through our depression, you know, a lot of times what will happen is that people will start thinking about suicide. You know, according to the CDC, every 12 minutes a person commits suicide, right? And the reason why I want to talk about this because I know in Islam we all know that suicide is impermissible, right? And we like to think that Muslims don't commit suicide. But the reality is that Muslims are not immune to suicide, right? There was a research study done. So first of all, it's hard to get statistics on Muslims and Muslims committing suicide, right? But in 2017 in Southern California, SoCal, there were 50 suicides reported just by Muslims. Like 50 Muslims committed suicide. And that was only in Southern California, right? And the LA and Orange and LA counties. So think about that. 50 in just that part. Now, like last year itself, I've heard, um, sorry, sorry, 1 minute. Um, my screen went out. So we're back. Um, just last year alone, I heard about three different cases of people, Muslim teenagers, committing suicide. And a lot of the times, what happens with the parents, they feel ashamed and they don't want people to know about that the kids committed suicide. So they might say they died in a car accident or they died in their sleep or something. But I mean, one case in particular last year, what happened was that, the brother of the person that committed suicide, he actually wrote out a letter. It was, you know, and he wanted everybody to know what his brother was dealing with. He actually shot himself, right? And his parents found him later on, and it was too late. They couldn't do anything about it. So, you know, it's hard to track suicide rates within Muslims because we don't talk about it enough. And this is something that we need to be more open about. Look, we all, have thoughts sometimes that I don't want to live, like, or we might have a thought like things are not going right in our life, right? I mean, that's normal. Like, oh, what happens if I'm not here? Life might be better for me or something like that. But, when it becomes more serious, we need to get the help. We need to get help. So, like, why do people commit suicide? Because their family environment might be terrible. They don't get along with their parents. They might be very, they might have some cultural conflicts. You know, it might be because of mental illness. Like depression, very severely depressed, domestic violence. They're just stuck in a very bad situation. Substance abuse. A lot of kids accidentally overdose, or they're taking drugs because they're unhappy and then they might overdose, right? Or financial loss. There was a case last year of of a he was a college student, and everybody's investing in stocks right now, right? So he invested. He was using one of these platforms, and he invested in stocks, and he was doing option tradings. And what happened was that there was a glitch, and it said that he lost $200,000. And what happened? He killed himself because he was very depressed because of that. A college student, and it was only 20 minutes from where I live. And what happened was that later on, there was actually a glitch, and they found out that actually he did not lose $200,000, but at that moment he thought he did, and he actually killed himself. Right? So we need to be cognizant of what people are going through so that we could help them. So when does it become dangerous, right? Because like I said, we might all have these thoughts about, what happens if I'm not here from time to time, right? But we're not actually serious about it. But when does it become really dangerous is when you have a plan and you have the means. Like you actually thought about a plan about how you would kill yourself, right? Or somebody would kill themselves. And if you have like a gun, you have a way of doing it, that's when it becomes really dangerous, right? And so what are some of the warning signs that we need to be cognizant of, especially as parents, when when teenagers and college students, they might be feeling this. We need to see their behavior change. Is something happening with them? Are they not doing their normal activities anymore, right? Negative thoughts. Are they always talking negatively? Are they always thinking like, "Oh, this world is terrible. I hate being here. I don't want to be in this life." Um, are they more isolated now? Are they not being around their friends? Are they away from everybody? Are they not even coming around us? Are they losing interest in things that they once found pleasurable? Do they have a desire to, not live anymore? Are they actually verbally saying it? There's a lot of clues, basically, what I'm trying to say, that people give off before they actually commit suicide. But unfortunately, a lot of times we don't pay attention and we don't think about it, and then, it happens. All right. So now we talked about anxiety, depression, suicide. I want to talk about some solutions for mental health, right? Number one is that get help. We need there's a big stigma around mental health, especially in our communities. And when our children are going through something, we might say, oh, get over it, pray Salah. Yes, you want to pray, you want to do all of these things. But you need to talk to somebody that you could trust. Have our children talk to somebody that they could trust, right? They might not trust us as parents because of we're subjective and not objective. We might, ground them. We might, look at them differently, right? They want somebody that they could talk to and not feel judged, right? So the other thing is that we have to let our children know that they're not alone. Lots of people think about, you know, are dealing with you know, s- uh, anxiety and depression, right? But if we don't talk about it and we don't let them know that, that other people are going through this thing, they think that they're isolated, they think they're alone, and that they're the only ones, and they feel like they can't get any help, right? Medication, right? Medication could help, or going to psychiatrist also, right? Because balancing chemicals, medication, what does it do? It balances chemicals in your brain, these neurotransmitters that affect our mood and emotions, right? It gives us that boost that we need, right? Exercise, because when you exercise, you release endorphins, which make us naturally happy, right? So exercise is really good. And then also religion, right? Like, yes, praying salah, doing adhkar, dhikr. All of these things help with mental health. But, you know, yes, we don't just say do one and not the other. We do everything. We talk to a therapist, we get the help what we need from a coach, right? We go to a psychiatrist if it's very severe, and obviously we pray and, exercise and all of that. So now, moving on along, I want to talk about alcohol, drugs, and vaping, right? Um, you know, Muslims are not immune to alcohol and drugs, right? As you can see over here, and some of the statistics that I put up here, right? 48% of women in college have tried alcohol, and we're only talking about Muslims now. This whole thing, this slide is particular to Muslims, right? 48% of Muslim women in college have tried alcohol, whereas 45% of Muslim men have tried alcohol. 17% of women in college have tried marijuana, right? And 18% of men in college have tried marijuana, which, another word is weed, right? 19% of women in college have tried illicit drugs. 29% of men in college have tried illicit drugs. Different illicit drugs like, cocaine, tried pills, Xanax, oxycodone, all of these different types of drugs, right? And 26% of women in college have tried tobacco, and 44% of men in college have tried tobacco. So, as you could see, our Muslim teenagers in college are doing a lot of the things that are prohibited in our religion, right? They're trying alcohol, they're smoking marijuana, they're doing illicit drugs, right? And we need to be aware of this because a lot of times parents don't know, right? We think that they're going off to college, right? And they're getting good grades, but we have to think about their akhirah too. We have to think about how this is affecting them, what's going on in their lives, um, what are they doing at college? So there was a study done by the National Institutes of Health on mice, right? Which showed how nicotine products are actually a gateway to drugs. So, 90% of those that have done, cocaine, right? They between the ages of 18 and 34 has said that they've smoked marijuana. I mean, they smoked cigarettes before, right? So 90% of those people that do harder drugs, it all starts off with where? It starts off with nicotine, tobacco, right? And we all know nicotine, according to the CDC, 480,000 people a year die from smoking, right? And 16 million are actually living with the disease caused by smoking. So I'm telling you some of these facts because we might think that, oh, tobacco is harmless. It's not as bad. But the reality is our children, they're starting off with tobacco, right? Or starting off with nicotine in general, right? Because a lot of people are not smoking cigarettes anymore. What's happening is they're using these things called vapes, right? Vapes, right? Which are, they could be jewels, vapes, and all sorts of e-cigarettes, right? And they're actually flavored now. So as cigarettes, like they had that nasty smell, they tasted nasty, a lot of people that was a deterrent. But now these vapes, when they there's jewels and all of that, they actually taste like whatever you want. You want bubblegum flavor, you want chocolate milk flavor, you want Oreos and milk, cookies and cream flavor. So kids are actually getting addicted at a younger age because it's very accessible and they actually like it, right? 27.5% of high school students and 10.5% of middle school students reported using these products, jewels and vapes, right? So people, our children are starting at a younger age because of the taste. They like the taste of it, right? And then it just becomes an addiction later on. So these are stuff that we have to be cognizant of, right? That are what happens when our Muslim students are going to college. As you can see, almost 50% are trying alcohol, right? And we know the ayats and everything about alcohol. So we need to be aware of that. Now, what else is happening with our youth and people in college? Well, relationships, right? As you could see, this is from the Family and Youth Institute. 48% of women, right, in college have premarital sex. That's almost 50% of women. And 55% of men in college have premarital sex. That means almost, like, I mean, just going around to 50%, 50% of our students are having sex before marriage, right? They're having sexual intimacy. They're engaging in sexual intimacy before they even get married. I mean, that's kind of shocking, right? Because we're setting them, they're going to school, but they're getting into these relationships, and before they even get married, they've already had sexual intimacy. So what do we do is, we need to teach our children about Islam. We need to have instill within them taqwa, right? Um, Not talking to the opposite gender, like keeping that distance, lowering the gaze, right? Um, Another thing that we need to do is we need to make it easy for them to get married, right? One of my friends, he actually told me that when he went to college, his dad told him that, listen, if you like a girl, don't do anything haram with her. Tell me, right? And I will talk to their parents and we'll try getting you married to that person, right? We need to help our youngsters, our the people in college, make it easier for them to get married and do things in a halal manner, right? And you might say, well, the divorce rate is so high, they might not have a good chance of making it. Well, that's why premarital coaching is there, right? Is that you go to somebody that's trained in this and they could make sure that what concerns might come out of it and help them with that. And then also as a family, we should make it easier for our youth to get married. Right? Like, alhamdulillah, I got married at the age of 20 when I was in college. And I thank my father for that, right? And alhamdulillah, it's been 12 years. I have 3 kids, and I've seen it. It's becoming more of a trend that younger people are getting married at a younger age, right? And we have to save our because everybody wants to feel loved. Everybody wants, you know, we see it's sexuality everywhere, right? And we're constantly bombarded with all of these things. So what happens is that they fall into a relationship and it might be innocent enough at the beginning, but then what happens is, how long are you going to just keep talking on the phone? How long are you going to keep texting? One thing is going to lead to another. Shaitan is there. And by the time you know it, like the statistics say, they've already had sexual intimacy before they even got married. All right. Now, moving on along, there's only a few more issues that I want to talk about, but this is something um, I feel like needs to be said, right? Is pornography, right? Pornography is huge, and I'm not trying to over exaggerate it, but it's really big within our society. As you can see, the average age of exposure is 11 years old. By the time that they're 11 years old, children are already exposed to pornography, right? By the age of 18, 93% of boys have been exposed and 62% of girls have been exposed. And this is by the age of 18. Think about that, right? Pornography, before I keep going on, is that it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? More than 40 There are more than 40 million websites out there. Now let's compare that to in 2001, there was only 70,000 websites, and now in 2021, in 20 years, there's 40 million pornography websites, right? And we already talked about the one in every 5 kids. They have an iPhone or they have a smartphone by the age of 8. So there's a lot of accessibility to go onto these websites and see, engage with pornography, right? Um, Another statistic that I wanted you guys to let you know is that we all know about Netflix, Twitter, and Amazon, but pornography websites receive more traffic, right, than Netflix, Twitter, and Amazon combined each month. Think about that. Everybody uses Amazon, Netflix, Twitter, right? But pornography websites receive more traffic than all three of those combined, right? Um, There's actually the World Health Organization. They said they actually recognize that this as a behavior disorder. It's called compulsive sexual behavior disorder, right? And, you know, we might think that, oh, our Muslims are not engaging in, pornography. We all know that's not permissible in Islam. But one of the things that I want you to know is that, one of there was data done by Google. Okay, there was data done by Google that showed that 6 out of the top 8 pornography consumers were Muslim countries. 6 out of the top 8, right? Um, number one was Pakistan, then Egypt, Iran, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. Those were the 6 out of the top 8 pornography consumers. So there's a lot of, you know, pornography is something that's really affecting our youth today. 64% between the ages of 13 to 23 are searching for pornography weekly, right? By the age of 18, like I already mentioned, right, 93% of boys have been exposed, 62% of girls have been exposed. And actually, 10% of teenagers admit to watching pornography daily. That's 1 out of every 10, right? People are saying that they're watching it on a daily basis, teenagers. Now, what are some of the effects? I want to talk some of the effects of pornography. So there's effect on the brain, right? So one of the effects on the brain is that, there's neurological research that has shown that pornography is addictive, right? Because of the neurochemical release in the brain that occurs while you watch it, while you view it. So, they get this euphoric high and it develops into a coping style for escaping emotional distress. So when people feel distress, when they feel stressed out, a lot of these teenagers, what they do is that they'll watch pornography to release and to make themselves feel better, right? According to the Journal of Adolescent Health, the effects of pornography is that, you know, they're, um, they believe that their marriage is sexually confining. Like when people actually get married, they feel like their marriage is restrictive because of all of the things that they're watching during during on these pornography websites, right? It's not normal, right? There's a lot of acts that are happening that normally wouldn't happen in a marriage, right? Um, and then loss of attraction to family and child raising. A lot of people, they don't want to have a family anymore because they're like, you know what, why be restricted to one person when I could have multiple people, right? When I could live a crazy life, do whatever I want, right? And then abandonment of hope of sexual monogamy, because in a lot of these videos, pornography videos, it's just not it's not monogamous. There's multiple people, right? So when you constantly start seeing that, you're not what happens is that it doesn't do it for you anymore, right? So then what happens is that you need to get more explicit, right? And then it eventually affects our marriages, right? Because what happens is that you become so addicted to it, right? That, you know, just regular intimacy is not enough anymore, right? You need more. You need to try new positions, new ways, and people that actually watch pornography, they're twice as likely to divorce in the following years than couples that do not, right? They have less sexual intimacy with their actual spouse, right? And it's a deterioration of for marriage. So, what are some solutions to pornography? There's, I just want to highlight four. Is one of them is enabling Google Safe Search, right? On Google, if you type it in, safe search, and you could try blocking out so that teenagers and people cannot go onto these pornography websites. Another method is blocking from the router, right? There's ways to do it from your DNS. You could Google that and figure it out. Another thing is having an open door policy. Like, a lot of times teenagers and people like to close their doors, and we don't know what's going on behind the doors. Like, we're growing up, my dad always told us that we have to have our doors open, and he wanted to see what's going on. So, having an open door policy, and being cognizant of what our children are doing. And there's a lot of apps, right? Apps to see activities that are occurring on these smartphones, so they could see like what your child is visiting, what your child is doing on their smartphone, right? So another thing I would say is, if you don't give a smartphone to your child, everybody has laptops, but have them use it in a public place. Have them use it in a place where everybody is, so that they don't get tempted to, go on these websites. I mean, I can't tell you how many people that I see that are dealing with pornography issues, right? A lot of couples are dealing with this, and they're not able to enjoy their spouses, right? And one of the female or the male, they might be getting hurt that their spouse is watching this, because I said it's not only limited to males, it's also females that are being affected by pornography, right? And it's causing less sexual intimacy and less attraction, because what happens is when you're watching this, like, listen, we are like, we've whoever's been to Hajj, that the Muslim Ummah, we're not probably in the best shape, right? We don't have personal trainers, we don't have people that can personal chefs and everything. So a lot of us might not be in the best of health. But what happens is that, when you're watching these videos, these pornography videos, these people are very attractive, right? They get models, the best of the best, like, with implants and all of these things. And now you're comparing and contrasting between who you have at home and what you're seeing at work, and in the videos, right? So think about how that affects marriages. So, all right, we're almost at the end, and I want to give some practical solutions now. So we talked about all of these things that teenagers um, and college students are dealing with, right? But now, what are some ways that how parents can help their children, right? How can we have a closer relationship with them? What can we do as parents? So, one of the first things I want to talk about is the lessons from Luqman alayhi salam, right? So, some people say he was a prophet, some people say that he was just a very pious man. I mean, that's besides the point. But there's a lot of benefits that we could take from, what he said in the Quran. Number one that I want to point out is how we talk to our children, right? The way that Luqman, uh, alayhi salam, he addresses children, right? He would say, or his son, he would say, Ya bunayya, which is a very loving way. Ya bunayya, right? Not Ya ibni, or, oh, Ya bunayya in the Arabic language, as people know it. It's a very beautiful way to say, oh, my dear son. So the first thing that we could learn is that when we talk to our children, we make them feel comfortable, right? We make them feel like they could open up to us. We don't make them feel defensive, right? We don't want our kids to. We don't want to talk to them in a stern way, a stern tone. We want our message to come across as soft, so that they will want to talk with us, open up to us, right? So that they eyes, like a lot of times when parents talk to them, to children, their eyes might roll, they might slump their shoulders, they might think, oh, here we go again, my parents are going to go off on me, you know so what we want to do is we want to talk to them in a loving manner, so that they could come to us with their issues, right? So that's the first lesson that I want to highlight. The second thing is, I'm going to skip the Arabic and just go into the translation. Is he says to his son, oh, my dear son, if there is from the weight of the grain of a mustard seed, and if it was in a rock, or in the heavens, or in the earth, Allah will bring it forth. Indeed, Allah is subtle, aware. What do we get out of this ayah? There's two things. The first thing that we get out of this ayah is we learn taqwa, right? Ins- we learn instilling the love and fear of Allah, right? Because Allah, He says, Allah, indeed, Allah is subtle and aware. Allah knows everything. Allah knows that what all we do. So yes, when you're about to watch that video, right? That video that you shouldn't do, watch. When you're with your friends and you might feel peer pressure to drink or smoke, know that Allah is watching you. Know that Allah sees what you're doing. And if you leave that, Allah will what? He will reward you for that. So instilling that taqwa within our children and letting them know that Allah is watching them at all times, right? The other thing that we learn from this ayah is the way that he addresses his kids at their level. He's explaining to them in a way that they can understand. A lot of times we feel shy or we don't feel comfortable talking to our kids or explaining something to them, right? But we have to go on their level and explain, like we talk about these things: pornography, alcohol, things that happen inside colleges, and depression, anxiety, and explain it to them in a way that they could understand, and so they could get the help that they need, right? So this is something else that we learn from this ayahs: talking to our children in a way that they can understand, right? The last thing, the last ayah that I want to highlight is when he says, "Oh my dear son, establish prayer and enjoying good, and forbid evil, and be patient with what afflicts you. Indeed, most it is from the most important commands." So what do we learn from here? Oh, wait, sorry. What we learn from here is, number one, establishing prayer, right? Because what does prayer do? I understand that we always say aqimus salah, right? Establish prayer. But what does it do? It brings structure into a person's life, right? Now, when a person has structure in their life, they're able to accomplish more, right? We have 5 times Salah. And, one person, when I was in college, he said that, man, I love having to pray. I said that, why? He said, if we prayed all our 5 salahs at one time, then I would have the rest of the day to do whatever I want. Right, I wouldn't think about Allah, but because I have, pray in a specific time period, right? I'm constantly thinking about Allah, and it stops me from doing haram and wrong, because I have to constantly worry about, okay, I have to make the next salah, I got to do the next salah, right? So it gives us a sense of structure, right? So that's one of the things that prayer does. The other thing that we learn from here is that being patient with what afflicts you. Bad things are going to happen in our lives, right? Everybody's going to go through something in life. We're all going to go through tests and trials and tribulations, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Baqarah that He's going to test us from things, from fear and hunger and loss of wealth and lives, and glad tidings to those who are patient, right? So we're all going to go through things, and what happens a lot of times is people lose iman. Our teenagers and children, college students, they lose their iman because what happens is they're like, why is Allah doing this to me? Right? And if we teach them the Quran and we teach them what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, right? Then they'll understand that, yes, this is something that Allah already said that He's going to do. He's going to test us to see who's really loves Him and who doesn't, right? And that we're going to be able to, take it with patience, right? So this is so important to teach our children that be patient with what afflicts you. And the last thing, advice to parents, this is the last slide. And then after this, we'll go into questions. Is I have some advice to parents, what they could do with their children. Is number one, become your child's friend. Ali radiallahu anhu, he was said that, in the first 7 years, play with the child. In the second 7 years, you know, discipline your child, teach them Quran, teach them how to pray and everything. And after that, befriend them. Become your child's best friend. When you're your child's best friend, they'll feel more comfortable to talk to you than a stranger. They'll feel more comfortable to open up to you than anybody else. And we want to be those people that who our children look up to, and we could help, right? That they come to us for help. We don't want them to go to the wrong people and get God knows what advice, right? But because if they come to us, we know we have our parents have the utmost love for their children, right? And they want only the best for the children. So become your child's friend. Be open with your child. Our children already experienced, like I already went through this whole program with you, right? Is that they've already been exposed to pornography, they've been exposed to drugs, they've been exposed to all of these things. Like either, inshallah, none of them done it, but they've actually been exposed to it. They know people that have done it, right? and all of these things. So be open with your child, speak to them. I've had a difficult conversation with my 8-year-old. He's come to me asking me, about certain things that he's seen in TV or that he might see on his iPad and stuff. And I've had these conversations with them, and I broke it down to him in a way that he could understand it. But I'm glad that he talked to me than before he talked to anybody else, and he got maybe wrong information or misinformation, right? Number 3, spend time with your child. I can't stress this enough. A lot of times, the parents always say, "I'm so busy. I've been working. I've been doing all of these things. I don't have time for my child." Right? Like I don't have time. I'm like, this is your child. This is your investment. Give each child at least 5 minutes a day. Sit down with them. I can't tell you, like, even with my 8-year-old son, how happy he gets when I give him that 5 minutes, and and all of the things that I learned from him, right? um about all, like, social media, and like what he's doing in life and everything. But if we do not give our children that time, then what happens is that we don't know what's going on in our children's lives, and then we're going to be oblivious, right? So it's very important to spend time with our children so that they feel comfortable with us and that they will open up. And that also goes into talking to your child, right? Have conversations, give time to your children like we give time to our phones and our friends. Spend time with them. Yes, they might be young and it might not always be the most entertaining thing to do, but it'll be pay off in the end, inshallah. So with that being said, I know it was a very lengthy lecture. Jazakumullahu khairan. And I just want to talk a little bit about, well, I want to open up to any questions that you all might have, right? Feel free to ask any questions that you might have. And then also, I just want to talk a little bit about this organization, Ihsan Coaching. Um, you know, uh, where is it? Uh, oh, 1 second. Uh, Oh, was the slides not going? I apologize for that if you're not able to see the slides. Um, but ask any questions you want, and then we open up Ehsan coaching for everybody. We have a mom self-care group, 8-week program for mothers that starts tomorrow. And Ehsan coaching is something that is for everyone across the US, right? So whoever needs help could get help. So I really appreciate everybody for attending today. If there's any questions, I am here. Please feel free to ask, and please visit us at www.ihsancoaching.com. Um, this is the website. So, not sure if there are any questions, any concerns, anybody wanted to ask. So, I mean, I have to. If there are no questions, let me just call Ask Malana Hamza. All right. If you do have any questions, please post it in the chat. Just 1 second. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Are there any questions or anything? Okay. Okay. So, all right, Jazakumullah khairan for that question. So, Mulana Hamza is saying that if a parent wanted their children to have sessions with us, so we do have myself and another female therapist, a female coach who's a licensed marriage and family therapist. Um, that works for Ihsan Coaching, and you could always go on our website www.ihsancoaching.com. Let me just go to the last page over here, and you could go there and you could sign up for a session, and um, it's self-explanatory from there, inshallah. So that's one of the ways that you could reach out and schedule a session for your child, or if you know anybody that needs help. All right. Um, I'm not sure why this is stuck on the suicide page. But are there any other questions? So just let you know that, please feel free to reach out, subscribe to our newsletter, um, you know, email us. We also have our female coach. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist with over 10 years of experience, alhamdulillah. So please feel free to reach out. And if there's no other questions, jazakumullahu khairan. I'll stay on for another minute or two, and then I'll end it. Yes, do. I can't wait to visit Cleveland. I'm from Ohio, so it'd be really nice to come visit Cleveland. So jazakumullahu khairan for having me. I apologize, the camera was off. I didn't realize that. Um, Feel free to reach out, and thank you for having me. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.